senior living has a PR problem. Outdated perceptions, negative media coverage, and a lingering nursing home stereotype are holding the industry back. But what if you could flip the script? Today's guest is leading the charge in reshaping how the world sees senior living. Let's get into it.
Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR Growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast that dives deep into the senior living and senior care industries, bringing you insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront of innovation, leadership, and care. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. For those of you who don't know about us, CCR Growth is a full-service marketing and growth agency exclusive to the senior living industry. Through this podcast, I'm here to guide you through the evolving landscape of senior care, exploring the innovations, the strategies, and leadership insights that are shaping the future of the industry. Whether you're a provider, a caregiver, or an industry leader, this show is here to help you make informed decisions and create meaningful impact. So today we are joined by Angelica Flynn, Vice President of AKCG, Public Relations Counsel, a firm specializing in strategic PR and crisis communication for senior living communities. Angelica and her team work to change outdated perceptions, shape public narratives, and help communities attract the right residents and staff. So in this episode, we got a lot to cover, but we're going to look at the differences between earned media and paid media and why both matter, how PR is helping to shift the outdated narrative of senior living, and crisis communications, what to do when your community is in the headlines for the wrong reasons. So Angelica, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I love talking about PR. I feel like it's like a secret weapon for a lot of communities that they don't really pull the trigger on very often. So I think the first thing I'd like to just ask is, can you start by explaining the role of public relations in senior living and how it differs from traditional marketing?
PR is part of the marketing mix. That's what I like to lead my clients with. A lot of our clients, they have a really robust marketing department. They have a fabulous website with SEO optimized web blog posts. They have direct-to-consumer mailing pieces. They had advertising, digital, and maybe even billboard ads. PR is just one part of that entire puzzle, and it's one piece that takes a lot of time. Now, the biggest difference between PR and those other marketing outlets is if you want your message to say a very specific thing, if you want a specific sentence, a very specific cadence of communication to go out, buy yourself an ad. But if you are willing, and understand the value of the third-party validation that comes through media coverage, then you want and you are a great candidate to go after earned media in public relations.
And I think you just mentioned media coverage. I think that's where, in most people's minds, that's where PR stops, but there's a lot more to it. How does strategic PR support occupancy growth, brand reputation, and community engagement?
Yeah, totally. So like beyond your traditional media relations where you're going out to the audiences that mean the most to you to kind of move the bottom line and whatever your goals are, you can reach out to different organizations that have stakeholders who have a, voice and a say in what you're trying to achieve with your organization. So it might be getting in contact with your local, for senior living providers, your local Office of Aging or your state chapter of Leading Age, making sure that your position is known in the industry and amongst your peers. That can do a lot for your brand, not only from like a perspective of getting yourself known with other providers, but potentially reaching people who could work at your community or live there.
The perception of senior living too, I think it hasn't always been positive. I think as we get through the generations here, every generation it gets a little better than the one before. It went from this scary nursing home scenario where everybody thinks they're going to get locked up in a building. Then it was retirement community, and now it's lifestyle community. So we're starting to change the narrative generation by generation, but that perception hasn't always been positive. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you've seen, and how can PR help change that narrative?
I think that the biggest misconception is that all senior living is a nursing home, right? Like if you work in the industry, a nursing home is just one subset, one option for people who need care. There's independent living where you are able-bodied, able-minded, and you can continue living this active and engaged lifestyle well into your 90s, maybe even 100. You could still be in independent living. So I think there's just a misconception that when you live in senior living, you are this, frail senior citizen who has a little bit of dementia perhaps and can't have command of their own activities of daily living. And that's not the case. And even for those who do live inside like an assisted living or even a skilled nursing facility, there's still independence. There's pieces of independence, ways that you can continue to have an active and engaging lifestyle no matter where you fall on the care continuum. So I think it's really important, and PR is doing a great job in helping move the needle on how we see senior living. We need to realize that it's not one size fits all. It's not one nursing home. It could be anything you really want it to be.
I like what you said too about the pockets of independence. I think a lot of communities, they really do try to weave that into the lifestyle as much as they can, even in assisted living or skilled nursing, because I think that's what humanizes the whole process. People don't feel like they're just a cog in a wheel or something. They still have a say. They still get to make some decisions. That's a really important misconception, I think, that a lot of people have, for sure. We talked a little bit last time about earned media and paid media and kind of where communities should invest their marketing dollars. So typically they're looking at kind of balancing their budgets between PR and digital ads, paid media, or content marketing. So how does earned media or PR complement paid media efforts?
When you're paying for an ad, you can have it exactly the language that you want to put forth, the exact message, whatever your brand promise is, you can have it exactly as written on your advertisement, your advertorial on your billboard. When you have PR, it complements that to reach an audience that you're not buying, right? An audience that doesn't know you. A lot of the time when we're advertising, we're targeting where we know people who are looking for our services are going, right? They're following your online activity. Maybe we're placing an ad in a specific magazine where people who have an older adult loved one is reading their news. Same thing for earned media. We are following where their audiences are going, but different than advertising and frankly, like any kind of owned content, your blogs, your social media, you're reaching people who don't necessarily know about you yet. Or maybe they are on the fringes of knowing about you and they just need a little push. An advertisement, because it's so rapid, it's so not blanket. I don't want to poo-poo on advertising. It does a great job of building awareness. But earned media, you have the ability to tell more of a story, to tell more of the story behind the tagline on the billboard. So for example, you have the senior living organization has a ad campaign about how seniors can have an active and engaged lifestyle when they live at this community. You can have a billboard that shows a beautiful image of a pair of seniors relaxing at a bar, having a drink in their independent living community. You can say active and engaged living at community. Well, that's great. That's a great billboard. But I don't know anything about that. That's just an image. That's not static. I feel something, but I don't know these people. When you have PR, when you've earned media, you're able to tell the story about those people. So maybe there's an actual pair of residents at that community who met in that bar, who are able to illustrate to audiences what it actually means to live an active and engaged lifestyle. And you're able to get that through earned media. That third-party validation, having a reporter cover the story instead of you writing it about yourself, there's so much credibility that comes with that because you're not buying the ad to tell the story about the two residents who are living your value and living your mission. A reporter is finding the intrinsic value in that story and is telling that story for you. There's so much credibility that in earned media still.
One thing I didn't ask in the beginning, I'm curious about is how did you get your start in PR, and then how did you end up at AKCG?
That's a great question. So I had a non-traditional route to agency life. A lot of folks will start in agency, then they go in-house. I started in-house and then I went to agencies. I was at a law firm for a couple of years. I was in higher education for a couple of years. And ultimately I found myself at AKCG because it kind of just spoke to me. And the idea of working with clients was really different than what I was doing in-house. And yeah, I just fell in love with storytelling, with working with clients to uncover what makes their organizations unique and how to kind of get that story told to audiences beyond the people who already work and live there. I wanted to tell that story more broadly.
Love that. Is AKCG, are you exclusive to senior living, or do you guys work with other industries?
We specialize in senior living, higher education, and independent education. So like your private K through 12. But it's interesting that you would think that education and senior living, right? They're on like kind of two ends of the spectrum of life in some way. But there are so many similarities between an independent living community and a school, right? Whether you're K through 12 or higher education, because the people who are making that decision to attend that school or to live in that community, they're kind of looking for the same things. You want, of course, you're the primary reason why you're going there. For many people, for senior living, it's healthcare. For many people, for education, it's academics. But rarely will you find anyone at a senior living community who chose that community only on the availability of nursing staff. Or rarely will you ever meet a college student who said, I am at school A because of the math program. No, there's so much more. They love the food. They love the activities that are available. They love the proximity to other things, the ability to walk off campus and go to a show in the city or go on a hike or go to the beach. Like, there are so many more things to do. And that's what's so interesting about AKCG, that we focus really in education and senior living. You would think they're completely two different audiences we're talking to, which is totally true. But there's a lot of similarity, and it just speaks to the human condition and humanity and our shared, interests across generations. Like, we're very different from. I'm a millennial. I have a lot of things not in common with my parents who are boomers, but we have a lot of the same interests and wants and desires. We both want to be intellectually stimulated. We want camaraderie. We want friendship. And I think that's it's interesting when you look at education, senior living. There's so much more in common than you would think.
There is. And I think even if you put yourself in the shoes of older adults and think about their life experience and what they want as seniors looking for a retirement community or something like that. One of my previous guests, he was saying, if you look at your father, your grandfather or grandmother, and they look like they're bored, they're sitting around all day watching TV and they don't look happy, like they're probably not happy. They're probably bored, and you would be bored too if you were doing that. So yeah, I love that. So you've worked with senior living communities on thought leadership and storytelling. What types of stories do the media actually want to cover? And how can communities leverage those stories to build credibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's first worth noting, right? The media landscape is totally different today than it was 5 years, than it was 10 years ago. And a lot of people, I'm sure, like, this is a podcast, right? In the yesteryear, this might have been a radio show. This might have been like an article in a newspaper, but people change the way that they want to consume media. It might seem like people don't read the news, but what I've been telling folks is people don't read the news the way they used to, but they are still getting news some way. It might be an article that was written by a newspaper and then shared on social media. Maybe they made a TikTok thing about it. I don't know, TikTok video on a news story. Maybe you're seeing it on a podcast now, but people are getting news. So I think it's important to realize that while media seems to be declining, it's just evolving. The way that they're telling stories is completely changing. So media is still really hungry for really good stories. Media loves stories about people. They love things that are a little different. You have a weird program, a resident who's done something for the first time. They love stories like that. They love to know things that they can use. So, you see a lot of articles about 10 tips for, aging in place. That's a very popular thing we see in aging media. Media love to give their readers something of value. I think above all, right, they want stories that are refreshing. They want stories that are positive. As much as the fire leads to the 5 o'clock broadcast, or the destruction of a building is the front page of a newspaper, positive stories are always going to be picked up by media, whatever they look like, And again, media is just changing the way they're delivering that news. You might see a YouTube video from People magazine where it's literally just a video of older adults having a luncheon at their community where performers came in. That is an actual story that shows up because it just makes you feel good. media wants story to build some humanity in their readership. Because remember, the media is telling stories not just to tell the stories. They're telling stories for their audiences, and audiences like good news. So I think that when you think about a senior living communities have all of those things. They have the people galore, whether it's the residents who live there or the staff members who provide care. They have clinicians, they have executives with so much expertise, so much tangible knowledge that they could share with individuals to give them something of value. And then they have so many great and happy stories. I mean, I'm sure you're talking to people who just like work in the industry, Jerry. You hear from people all the time. This resident, when she came into this community, she was lonely and depressed, and she wasn't eating anymore, and she had no interest. And then she moved to this community, and now she's part of the women's club. She's part of she's head of the resident association. She goes on the trips every weekend, and there's been a complete 360 with mom. Like, that is a story you hear over and over again, and people love to hear about these positive things. And it doesn't even need to be as drastic as, oh, mom was declining and then she came to live at the community and her health turned around. It can be something as small as, there's a community where there's a very strong contingency of veterans who are so proud of their heritage, who are so proud of the fact that they served. And you know what? We're going to celebrate them with an event. And that can be media worthy, right? Just something as celebratory as a luncheon for veterans at a community. I think that the problem, and I face this time and again with our clients, is so many amazing things happen at their community day in and day out. Residents live to be 110. Residents have these really quirky hobbies that are so weird and different.
Yeah.
Staff members win awards and are teaching new ways of treating memory care residents. And communities see that every day, and they're just like, yeah, Mrs. Johnson, she just has a hobby of quilting jackets for everyone. She just did 100 last week.
Is that what's going on?
They just don't realize that, like, they think, oh, only the people who live here and who work here will care about this. No one will care about this, but they will care about that, right? And I think that communities, because they're so steeped in the day-to-day, they don't have the chance to step back literally and say, oh no, like, people would love to hear about Mrs. Johnson and her jackets. And it's just that realization that, like, what they're seeing as day-to-day is actually eccentric and weird and cool and uplifting, and it makes for a good media story. They just don't see it. So that's something I see a lot.
Yeah, just finding the goal is so important in those situations. Even our local news here, I noticed I follow the news on Instagram and TikTok. I don't even go to their website. I don't read the newspaper anymore. It's all done through their social media channel. They even have anchors that are just on their social media channel that are creating videos for that versus, the ones that show up on TV. So I just think it's interesting. And I think that's where kind of the senior living industry struggles with keeping up to date with that stuff. When they hear PR and they hear, media placement, they're probably thinking, oh, local TV, or they're thinking like local newspapers, and not as many people are reading those as they were. So it may not be worth it. But it's like, if you can get placements on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, like all these other social channels that people are following and tuning into on a regular basis, it could be really powerful.
No, absolutely. And like, you're seeing that a lot more lately. You'll see, like, I'm here in Philadelphia. There's, I think we were just at like the CBS affiliate a couple months ago, and they were talking about how they're having they have social content only. Or Fox 29 down here, they have an app only show where you can only get it on the mobile device. So there's a lot of content and there's a lot of time on the air. And you're right, like, I'm not sitting down to watch my 5 o'clock news, but I am on Instagram, and they share the same stories packaged in a different way on social media. So again, right, media is declining in some way, but it's evolving. They're just choosing different channels based on where audiences are going.
One of the other complaints I hear a lot about PR is the measurability of it. Like, how do they track ROI on their efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that continues to be a challenge, right? Because it's the same thing with like matching ROI on like social media, on those owned media. Like, you could say, like, I got 6 million impressions on this social media post, but what is that actually going to do? Or I got, 5,000 page views on this blog post, but what is that going to do? So it's tough to say, like, this led to that. This led to a uptick in inquiries. But what we can say, it's a great compliment to, again, that marketing mix, right? You have an advertising campaign, you have a social media presence, you have blogs that earn credibility. It all adds up to, in the end, how are people perceiving your organization and how is it influencing them to act? The best return that I've heard has been anecdotal, frankly. I work with some senior living organizations outside of senior living, and we did an op-ed for an organization about the benefits that one can have in being a participant of this organization. It was a PACE organization, Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly. The program director received in the mail a letter from a woman who wrote about how she read the op-ed in the newspaper and how she never knew that that organization existed. And because of that, she was able to reach out and get herself and her elderly sister enrolled in the program and to get healthcare. So you hear that a lot, and because that's the power of a story, right? You don't really, you hear it anecdotally, but when you do it, it really lasts with you. You can only hope that that kind of story is resonating with more people. And we do track data, we track audience impressions, we track how impactful a placement can be to an organization's reputation. And the best return that we can see is when we talk to our clients and we say, how is the website traffic on your inquiry page to this community? Or, if we're doing a big push about the active and engaging lifestyle that you could find at this community, how are the inquiries and what are they asking about when they're making that inquiry? A lot of it is anecdotal, but it does play a part in that larger marketing mix.
I think that's a big part of it too, is the self-reporting that has to happen from the community itself to really give you that feedback. Even in our space, even with, we run paid ads, we can measure the results on those. We can run SEO campaigns, we can measure the results on those, but still, like, we're continuously asking the communities for feedback. How are those leads? Are they good quality? Is this working for you? Do we need to change things up? So I think that's important. From a technical side of PR, I know with ads and with all the different channels that we touch on our end, we can use like tracking URLs. So we can put parameters in the URL to basically tell it, the source of this traffic is coming from Google. It came from the Google business profile, and it was an organic lead. Are you able to do that with PR? Can you put those tracking URLs into the pieces that you put out there? Or is it typically just like the standard domain that you would use?
Typically the standard domain. I think the beautiful thing is when you especially have an online piece or something that runs in like the digital space, you can kind of follow the links, right? Like it's the same thing with marketing. If they backlink to your client, that is so valuable. You get the positive story, the credibility from being on a third party, then you get the backlinks from your URL being on that story. So that's chef's kiss, right? But I wish I could track when people watch the news or scroll and see it, how they feel about it. The best way to measure that is through surveying, right? Perception research. We have the capability to do it. A lot of clients, because we move so fast, we don't do that. So the best way to gauge how impactful a story can be on the reputation and how impactful it is on how they behave in response or like how they feel about the organization is once we get them in the door and get that and ask during the intake, how did you hear about us? What do you know about us so far? How do you feel about Community A?
I'm glad you mentioned backlinks too. That's not something many of my guests even talk about, but that is such a huge part of what we do, is trying to get authoritative domains to link back to our communities, because we know how valuable that is. So anyone out there who's listening who doesn't know about backlinking, I mean, if you can have an authoritative domain like a news source who has a trusted domain score link back to your community page, that's going to reap so many rewards for you. So even if you can't measure the PR piece itself, the fact that you have a piece on their website that's now linking back to your site, that's going to help so much with visibility and search.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. Switching gears, kind of going down the crisis communication street here, senior living providers are often like one bad review or one negative news story away from serious damage to their reputation. I mean, I've seen just a simple 1-star review wreak havoc in communities. So how should they prepare for a crisis before it happens?
Yeah, absolutely. And so AKCG, we provide media relations services. So getting that positive, good news in the news. But we also have crisis communications. Our counselors are available 24/7 to our clients. So no matter when there's a crisis that strikes, someone is there to help communicate through and to your most important audiences. So the best thing that we can do is to be prepared and kind of have the people and the resources in place. Kind of unsatisfactory in some way, right? Because you're just like, just be prepared all the time. Like you would have a go bag if you were about to have a baby, or like you have a fire extinguisher. You should always have things ready. A lot of organizations, what they'll do is they'll put together a crisis communications book, right? And they'll look at it once a year and refresh it. And like maybe the CEO got trained on it when it was created. But when a crisis strikes, is that thing ready? Probably not. Crisis manuals or crisis plans, they should be part of your day-to-day. Well, maybe not day-to-day. Always should be aware that it's there, and it should always be regularly attended to. You shouldn't be scrambling to say like, oh, if there's a fire, who do we go to? Who's going to communicate? That the roles, maybe not a specific person, but the role and who is going to communicate to whom, that should be lined up, because that's going to help any organization communicate with their most important audiences faster once a crisis strikes. So the best thing you can do to be prepared is to have those people and have those resources kind of outlined about really high level.
Sounds like having that on like a quarterly training basis or something like that, just to make sure everybody knows what's at stake and what to do in a situation like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that we design crisis plans for our clients is scenario based. So what good is it to say, like, if something bad happens in general, like you should say this or that? It's so specific, right? And crises are special little snowflakes, and every organization is going to be affected differently by fire, right? Like, or what crisis of the month. So what we do is we put together crisis plans so that folks know kind of what to expect in general. Again, who is communicating with what audiences, the kind of strategy that you should be trying to hit in your first communications to those audiences, and kind of also just like training those muscles in case it was to happen. So our crisis plans are there for our communicators all the time. I think they delivered at a different cadence depending on what your program with AKCG is. But crises are not something that they wait. They are constantly preparing for them.
What about something like COVID? If there was another pandemic, I mean, how did AKCG handle that?
To be fair, how did anyone handle that? Right. I think that if there was another issue of that magnitude, and honestly, you know, I think that's something that a lot of clients think is that a crisis is when COVID happens, or a crisis is when there is a fire. But a crisis could be anything that can materially affect your reputation. It could be that 1-star review. It could be a altercation between 2 staff members that is only witnessed by residents. It could be like a resident who had a bad interaction with a salesperson, right? These are very isolated events, and you might not think to yourself,
that's a great point, though.
It's not a crisis. They're like, people will be like, that's not a crisis. But don't think of it as the word crisis. Think about it as how it's going to affect your reputation, right? If there's a pair of staff members having an altercation, that could get out. That could, to the community. These 2 residents are fighting with each other in the back office, and other employees here. And now it's a toxic work environment. It's a hostile work environment. Residents see that. That's affecting how they feel about living in a community. Maybe they don't feel safe anymore, and that can affect their reputation from within, and that can go transcend outwardly. So I think when we talk about like how to prepare for something of that magnitude, again, like you should always be prepared for any kind of crisis by having the resources in place, knowing who the people you have to work with are, and kind of just like knowing what's at your disposal.
I feel like crisis management has probably come more front and center since COVID, though. A lot more providers are probably thinking, oh, we should probably have a definitive plan in place just in case something like that rears its head again.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, if we do crisis plans, many organizations have crisis plans, but we could have a crisis plan with 20,000 scenarios. Well, the one that actually happened, the COVID-19 pandemic, that wasn't in there, right? So it's interesting that like you can be so prepared for specific instances, but you can plan for specific things, but it's in general. You just need to be prepared if your reputation is at stake, and who are the leaders that you can look to communicate, and what's the kind of strategy that they should be communicating through? Who are the most important audiences to get to? Who needs to hear from us first? Like those are the things we should really consider.
And if a community does find itself in the headlines for the wrong reason, what is the first step they should take to managing the crisis effectively?
right? I think the first thing is not to act too fast. We need to figure out there's a lot of stakeholders, especially in a community. You have the people who work there, you have your residents, you have your loved ones, you have elected officials, you have different regulatory bodies. They all have eyes on you depending on what the issue at hand is. But what you need to think about, because there's a lot of communication that needs to happen, is you need to think about who needs to be communicated with first. Because we need to communicate to a lot of people, but they don't all need the same message, right? So don't sit on it too long, but figure out who needs to be communicated with first. That is the absolute most first thing you should do before you communicate. You don't want to send out a blanket, let's say, statement that doesn't resonate with every audience group. That can come later. Think about who needs to hear from us first.
I think just having this conversation is good, because I don't think a lot of providers probably think about PR when they think about crisis management. I know they're thinking about, like, after the crisis happens, we need to clean up our mess and reinstate our reputation. But, like, in the moment, PR and developing these tools ahead of time can really help shape the narrative from the start. So I think getting people on board to prepare ahead of time, I think, is such a great message.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for some organizations, they might think to themselves, well, I don't need media relations because I always have, no press is good press in some ways, right? Then I just need the crisis communications, because just in case. We like to think about communications like kind of being like, not like a cycle, but there's like different areas where you could be. You should always be building your reputation, right? Adding to your bank of goodwill, making sure there's positive stories about you in your community, in the press, just in the greater audiences beside who live and work at your community. You should always be working to build that reputation for your senior living community. But you should always be protecting it. So in case something happens, you are ready to defend your reputation, right? That's our crisis communications arm. You're ready to kind of respond to the issues. You're able to come out of a crisis and kind of, again, like, rebuild. We also like to say that after the storm has passed, it's time, at some point, when the time is right and you kind of figure that out internally and with your counsel, it's time to recharge your reputation. And for clients who are in that position where you have just underwent a challenge for however long it was, there is a time where you need to come out of the sand and reassert who you are and your mission and all the things that you were talking about earlier. I do find when you already have a bank of goodwill, right, after a crisis passed, people don't just remember that one bad thing. Yes, that bad thing is bad. I'm not going to say it's not. But there are so many other good things that happen at your community, and it's evident through your own communication, your social media, and your earned media. That's going to bolster your reputation. It's going to help bring you back. When it's time to recharge when it's time to recharge your reputation, there's a lot of very specific audience work that we need to do. Similar to crisis communications, we need to think about who needs to hear from us first. When you're recharging your reputation, and we work with clients on this a lot, we need to think about, like, what do they need to hear from us after the storm has passed? And it's a very targeted approach for every different stakeholder group. But yes, there's absolutely a time to build, to restore, and to recharge your reputation.
When it comes to reputation management too, in terms of negative reviews, what is your advice to providers to help manage those and minimize the impact that those have?
Absolutely. I think that I was just speaking with one of my crisis counselors here at the firm to talk about that specifically, because it is a challenge that you get a bad review, that you can't get them taken down unless there's a real reason to do so. And I don't even know the reasons that a Yelp or a Glassdoor would take down a review at this point. You cannot get them easily removed. But what you can do is respond to the next one, right? Take a step back, remove the heat. What can you do moving forward? Don't just, everyone says, like, it's a statement. Oh, they're going to say that they're going to change things, but what are you going to do? Reflect on that review, because while it may be emotionally charged and it may be very specific to someone's personal and professional grievances, perhaps, let's say from a Glassdoor perspective, there may be a kernel, a sand, grain of truth. And being able to address that is going to move the needle so that the next time you can say that we have been steadfast in our commitment to our employees, that we have been doing everything we can to make sure they're having a positive work-life experience.
The three opportunities I think I've found in reputation management to get reviews removed, and it varies by platform. If we just talk about Yelp and Google, for instance, I think privacy concerns is probably the biggest one. So if anyone at the communities is mentioned by name, even if it's just first name, if you flag that review, you can typically get it removed for privacy concerns. The second would be if there's a conflict of interest. So if it's a former employee who gets let go and now they're, throwing up bad reviews all over the place, they're just saying all this stuff just to get reputation in the dumpster. Typically we can get those removed. Profanity is usually the other one. If they say anything, even if it's a minor curse word, typically that'll get removed. The one thing that the review platforms won't get involved with is factual disputes, especially Yelp. They'll tell you flat out, like, if you're just saying that this isn't factual, we have the proof, they don't care, they don't want to hear it, they won't remove it. Google actually has a platform where you can appeal reviews. So there is an opportunity. You can appeal the review. You can send information in. So if there is a documented case, as long as you're not violating any HIPAA laws by doing it, you can put that information into Google and they will actually take the review down. But it is a process, but it is possible to some degree. But you are limited in your options for sure. Yeah. Many providers struggle to market to younger seniors and changing the perception that senior living is just a last resort, right? So how is PR helping communities position themselves as lifestyle-driven, vibrant places to live?
Yeah, absolutely. I can say one of my clients, they are very hot on, they have the full continuum of care, so it's a life plan community, but they really want to sell their independent living because there are so many amenities for your younger boomers, for your older Gen X, right? That they would like in their life before retirement. So something that I'm seeing a lot of communities do is to not just say we have an active and engaging lifestyle that you can have here, but to introduce amenities, programming, activities, what have you, that really speak to that generation, right? My mom is a boomer and she would hate me for saying this right now, but she would be like, I'm not going there. All they're going to do is play bingo. They're not going to do anything fun.
That's my mom.
She goes out dancing. She goes out for a drink with my dad. Well, a lot of communities have dancing. They have social events. They have parties. They have cocktail hours. Like, I can't tell you how many communities I went and visited and they're like, you going to stay for cocktail hour? Every day at 4. We have the sushi chef come down. Like, that kind of thing happens a lot. People just don't know that. So they don't know about that. They don't know about the bars that are inside some communities. I have communities that have these beautiful high-end tapas lounges, wine bars. They look like 5-star restaurants. And it's on locations, on campus. We have communities that have fitness gyms, like our fitness facilities, that are more than just free weights and like a treadmill. Like, they are state-of-the-art with the most advanced machinery you can get in any high-end gym, right? Like, there's a lot of amenities that are speaking to the younger, older adult, because that's what they have now. And they don't want to lose that when they move from their home to a community. So in storytelling, we like to tell those stories about those older adults who are using those amenities, who are taking advantage of these programs. One of the big things in a lot of the communities I serve is civic engagement and like giving back, a lot of sustainability initiatives. One of the things we'd love to highlight is how older adults are kind of taking it upon themselves to kind of leave a better world than what they found, right? There's a lot of seniors who are so passionate about the environment. It's a beautiful thing to see. And they are leading the charge at their communities to say, no, we should clean up the river that is adjacent to our community. We should be installing the kinds of lighting that is environmentally friendly. And we should be only using plants that are compatible with wildlife here, things like that. And I think that people think that when you live in a community, these things are done to you, right? You go to a community, they give you food, they give you shelter, they give you environment. A lot of communities, you can have a say. You can be on a resident advisory board and have just as much a say as you did when you work on the PTA for your kids, right? Like, you can go, and if you have a passion for the environment, you don't need to stop that when you're in a community. You actually might have more resources now than you did when you were living at home in your single family residence. You have so much more than what people think. And I think it's because, again, the perception is it's a nursing home. You're just there to have a nurse on by. But I think the new senior living experience is not just to have a nurse on by, is to have a life, and is to have freedom, and is to be untethered from responsibility and have this truly taking advantage of your retirement years. And that's the stories that we love to tell to change that perception.
I think along with the perception shifting towards more of a lifestyle driven community, there's also the language that's evolving too. And I know we've both switched a couple of times today between saying senior and saying older adults. So I think that's part of the narrative too, is not calling them seniors and calling them older adults. It's helping the younger, older adults see themselves, in that space and not necessarily as seniors, because they don't identify as that. I mean, most boomers, they're like, I don't want to go live with a bunch of old people. I don't want to go play bingo. Like you said, I mean, that's just the nature of it. And I mean, even I had one of my guests come on and she said one of the questions she always asks her residents is, what age do you feel? And the overwhelming majority, even if they were like 80, 85, 90, they all said like 45, 47, 48. It was like late 40s, early 50s, all of them, so it's everybody kind of connects with the younger version of themselves, even as they age. They don't really see themselves that way.
Yeah,
so I find that
absolutely. And it's kind of like you see yourself that way and you still have those passions, that interest. Maybe physically you can't run a marathon, but you can still walk, right? Like there's still ways to feed that desire as you get older. You're not changing completely. You still are the same inside, right?
Yeah. And I think, with marketing and with PR, I think repetition and consistency in the way that you talk about things helps shape public perception. So, I mean, in this case, if we're trying to shift the language from saying senior to older adults, I mean, how important is the language in shaping public perception?
It's huge. That is a huge thing. And I have said senior a couple times. And I think when I say it, like it's so unnatural, because I do say older adult for all of my clients, because that's the image they want to put forth. You're an older, active, engaged adult, a mature adult, if you will. We don't even use words like nursing homes anymore, right? Well, I don't use that. But the problem is, because the public, that's what they know. They know senior, and it's a tug of war. I'll tell you this: when we go and tell stories to the media, we have asked for correction if they have put nursing home. We're not in nursing home. We're in senior living community. And that's factual. Like that is, because nursing home is a level of care, right? And they might live in independent living. So it's a lot of repetition, to your point, and they're not all going to know it the first time you go out to the media. But eventually, as they get to know your community, they start to use that language as well. And then ultimately, you'll change that perception in your like local markets.
Even using the word retirement community, I think, is a bit outdated, because there's people in the community who are not technically retired. They may want to simplify their life and downsize, but they might still be working a part-time job, or maybe they're a freelancer or a consultant, or they're working an encore career, something they never got to do before, and now they have the time to do it. So we're starting to see more and more of that too. I think it's interesting. So even retirement community, I think, is kind of outdated.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that there's an idea from like nursing home, like you lose all your agency, like you lose all of your ability and choice. And
you're just giving up.
You're just giving up. You're giving yourself to the nursing home where they can take care of the seniors. See, that's like a derogatory thing to say too, like take care of, right? Like provide care. That is the better way to say what a senior living community is doing for an older adult, is to provide care when they need it, should they need it, if they need it.
If they need it,
because they're very, very well, people in their 90s, probably in better health than me. How many times do you see a resident who's like, they work out every single day and I have not touched my gym equipment in months, right? They are in better shape than me. And it's just, we have to change the perception that old age means lack of ability, lack of agency, because you have just as much. It's just when you're in a senior living community, there's that idea that you're like, I don't know how to explain it. Like you just lose your agency, but you don't. And I think that by not calling it a nursing home at face level, not calling it a retirement home, by calling it a community, it's vibrant, it's engaging, you're participating in it, that's going to go a long way for the industry.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. Well, I think my last question, just kind of fast forward looking down the pipeline for the next 5 years. I mean, what do you think is going to be the biggest PR challenges for senior living providers?
The next 5. So we're in 2025 and 2030. I've been talking a lot about the silver tsunami, right? There's a huge population growth of older adults who are going to need housing, right? And whatever that means, are they going to want to live in a senior living community? Are they going to want to age in place and stay at home? We don't know. What we can say right now is that the inventory that we have in our senior living communities, they don't have enough space for everyone in case every single person was to say, I want to live in a community. We don't have enough. So the challenge is going to be is to make sure that everyone knows of their options. And there are so many options for you. Like, you don't have to just go to a nursing home. You could go to an independent living only community. You could go to a life plan community where it goes from independent living down to skilled. There are such organizations as CCRCs Without Walls, where you get the benefit of a life plan community, a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, but you get to live at home if that's the best option for you. So I think one of the biggest challenges is housing, of course, and being able to communicate to this huge population of older adults that you have options. You do not need to feel disempowered or like you are going to be quote unquote stuck anywhere, whether it's at home or in a community. There are a lot of options, and it's going to take a lot of education through whatever means, marketing and PR, to help folk kind of understand that they're not just a cog in the wheel. They're not just being placed somewhere, that they're somewhere they can choose to go or to stay if they like.
I think that's a really important point, because we hear a lot about the inventory situation. If every development project was finished between now and the year 2030, it said like that's only 30 to 40% of the inventory that's needed to place everyone, but not everyone's going to be looking. I mean, I know in my community here, 70% of the people here are 65 and above, and nobody's selling, nobody's moving until they absolutely have to. It just doesn't make sense. I think we're going to see life expectancy, longevity. People are living longer, healthier lives. So they're not really thinking about senior living as an option until they're in their 80s now, where I think the previous generation, it was when they were in their 70s. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see what happens too, but I'm glad you mentioned all those other options. That's pretty cool. The CCRC Without Walls. I love that. How can our audience stay connected with you and learn more about AKCG Public Relations Counselors?
Yeah, so our website is akcg.com, and we publish a lot of content. We have newsletters so that you can keep up with us. We have a lot of webinars that are free to anyone who's interested in senior living content. We give a lot of webinars about how to get your community in the news or how to prepare for crises. We're also on social media at AKCG Firm. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
Awesome. You guys are everywhere. So, okay, great. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a huge thank you to Angelica Flynn for joining us and sharing your expertise in public relations, crisis communications, and reshaping the narrative around senior living. Your insights are a powerful reminder of how storytelling and media strategy can impact everything from occupancy to brand trust. So thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it. If you want to stay connected with Angelica and learn more about AKCG, visit akcg.com and follow her on LinkedIn. And I'll make sure I put all the things she mentioned in the show notes so everybody can stay connected across social media. As always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the evolving world of senior care, covering everything from innovative care models and leadership strategies to family support, technology, and the future of aging. Also, remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience, we're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our episodes, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube or Spotify channels. I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth. Thank you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, and I truly appreciate if you would like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm grateful for your time and attention. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Angelica.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.